Hi, I'm Terry Kimball, President and CEO here at the Chandler Chamber, and I have with me Congressman Andy Biggs. Welcome.
Thank you.
Congressman Biggs is running for re-election in Congressional District Number 5. So let's talk about that. Why do you want to run for re-election?
Well, I do feel like there's not, I haven't finished all the work that I wanted to go. When we talked probably 8 to 10 years ago, I said I want to work on bending the spending arc down, right? And I've been working like crazy, but our structural deficit remains growing, actually about $2.5 trillion a year. So there's work to do on that, and right now the border. It's a big deal. I'm kind of the leader in the Republican Party now in Congress on the border issues, working with a number of people. I take people down to the border constantly, and I just feel like the work's not done yet.
Well, I appreciate those comments. So let's talk a little bit about the district. What do you feel are the biggest challenges that are facing the district in Arizona within the next 4 to 5 years?
Well, so, I mean, I'll leave out the border, but I'll get to energy and its impact on pricing in Arizona, as well as on the continued expansion. So when I look at our district, CD5, it's going to continue to grow. We're about 850,000 people in the district now. We've already grown by 35,000 people since the redistrict. And by the time we redistrict again, we'll be about 1.2 million people. And so that means there's going to be dynamic growth. A lot of that falls on the local and state, but a lot of it deals with the regulatory environment and the economy that Congress impacts. And so I think that the economy, energy, I think water policy, all of that's going to dynamically impact us. And then, quite frankly, I hope we move the federal government back out of the education industry, because we need to make sure that Chandler's got a good school district, Mason, Gilbert. We're fortunate we have good school districts here, but we need to get out of the way and let them do their job.
I love that, local control. So the Chandler Chamber here represents about 172,000 employees here in Chandler, and which is a big business. We have a lot of number of businesses, from our small businesses to our large businesses. How will you foster a positive relationship between your office and the Chandler Chamber and the business community?
Well, first of all, I have an open door policy, so anybody can come in, and if I'm unavailable, my staff is available to talk, and then we will address the issues that are raised. So I think that's important. But the second thing is, as you hold events and whatnot that I can come and attend, or my staff can come and attend, we take that feedback seriously, and you will have people that come back to Washington. We'll sit there at that little round table and we'll talk about everything from water issues to whatever else is going on out here. And then if there's a way that we can implement policy regarding it, we'll look to do that to facilitate that. That's really the way it's supposed to work, I think, and we do try to foster that.
So how do you actively protect the interests of the business community? And talk a little bit about the avenues of communication you have or that you'll continue to provide for local businesses.
So when we look at the policy, and I'm going to give you a little data point on regulations in DC, I try to figure out what regulations we can attack, because there are mountains of regulations that go into effect every year. Congress we don't even review those. And of those, Terry, I asked the Congressional Research Service, how many of these are felonies if you don't comply? They said nobody's been able to count the number of felonies, but there's at least 40,000 felonies. So if you don't comply. So I say that by providing a frame of reference and context. I view the tax and the regulatory environment really essential to fostering a healthy business environment. So I'm trying to go through and decriminalize those 40,000. Why are those crimes? Congress didn't make them crimes. The regulatory agency made them crimes. And so that's just a frame of reference, so you know we are looking at trying to get big, big government out of big Chandler business and small Chandler business here as much as possible.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how do we make that unified political environment? How do you make that? How do you plan to do that in Congress? And then how do you collaborate with others that may not agree with you?
Well, you look for what you agree on. I mean, so I just got a lovely. When I went back, I was in D.C. on Sunday, Monday, and there was a lovely note from Zoe Lofgren, who's from California, and she said, "Thanks for voting with me on the PRO Act," which I opposed, and she voted no, and we actually stopped that bill in a bipartisan way, because that would have actually required, getting back to regulations, that would have required people, if you needed to get the regulations, you would have to pay for them. And it just seems to me that if you're being regulated and you have to follow the law should at least be free so you can see what it is you're supposed to follow. Anyway, so that's what I'm talking about. We find the places we agree on, whether it's FISA warrant requirements. We had total bipartisan on that. We had 212 votes, the most in history, and that was my proposal, my bill that was out there. And you find that, and that's where you run with. There are things that you just cannot get to because they disagree vehemently. It's a philosophical, ideological point of view, and I have my philosophical, ideological point of view, and we just can't bridge the gap. But where you can bridge the gap, you try to do that and keep the doors open.
So you talked a little bit about the budget earlier. So how do we maintain fiscal responsibility, and how do we prioritize allocation of monies?
Well, so okay, next question, Terry. Thank you. No, let's consider this. In the 2018 Job Cut and Tax Act, Tax Cut and Jobs Act, that's what it is, Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Within about 4 months, we started receiving record amounts of revenue because the economy became immediately almost more vibrant. So businesses were able to hire more people, invest more capital, et cetera. But what Congress didn't do was keep the spending at the same level that you had before. There's no reason, just because you're getting more money, that you need to spend more money. And there was no inflation, so why were we increasing? That's the first thing you have to do, is you have to acknowledge that Congress simply just can't spend that much money. The current structural deficit is about $2.5 trillion a year right now. We spend more on interest for our national debt than we spend on our national defense, that last year was the first time that happened. That's the first time in history. And so what I try to remind people is, and I was telling you, Terry, I was up really early this morning, and I was actually texting with some of my colleagues back on the East Coast, and they were like, "What are you doing up so early?" And I said, "Can't, the budget's a mess, and so what are we going to do?" And as long as if you're content for the status quo to remain in place, it's just going to continue to grow, this debt and this structural deficit. We have got to say we're going to go back to the 1972 Budget Control and Impound Act, and actually go through the process where you're going and looking at the agencies and saying, this is duplicative, this is wasteful, we don't even have any constitutional structure that allows us to do this. Whatever it is, you go through and you start paring those out. And what I have found is when you do that, people think you're just, Satan incarnate. And I actually introduced 500 bills a year and a half ago that would have shown how you could, we were going line by line. My staff and I, we were into agencies and departments saying, this agency is doing this agency is doing this, it's duplicative, you can cut one or the other. And the powers that be refused to even look at any of those 500 reductions. And I think right now it just takes somebody like myself and then a band of other people to just constantly remind my colleagues, we can't do it, we've got to bend the arc down, we have to bend the arc down. And I do say that the voters need to do it too, because 10 years ago, or 8 years ago when I ran, the first time, I was talking about it, and the voters everywhere across the country were talking about that. You remember this, there was a groundswell, because 2008 you had seen a national downturn economically, and people were like, the government's too big, et cetera, et cetera. And We haven't balanced a budget since 1996, and that's a problem. So we need the help of the public, but we do need members of Congress who will say, we just simply don't have the money to spend it.
So if you are reelected in November, what is going to be your number one or number two priority that you want to work on and focus on?
Well, number one will be the border, and that's H.R. 2. So at one time or another, I've introduced every piece of that bill. It's 8 bills, and it's been combined, and people were carrying different ones of my bills that we got combined. H.R. 2 needs to be resolved because it deals with everything from Title 42, Remain in Mexico, Flores, asylum, all these things that would allow us to actually secure the border. So that would be the first goal, is to actually secure the border and stop that. And there's a whole series of other items there. Number two, for me, is to, even though I'm not on any committees that deal with, and I'm not, judiciary deals with the border, so that's a committee I sit on. But the other one is work with my colleagues who actually sit on these committees on energy policy, because right now to explore, develop, extract, and refine and transport is basically too costly, forbidden, takes too long to get there. The regulations, the environmental regulations are a real pain in the neck. And we need to break that out, because 40% of your higher cost right now is energy costs. And if we did that and get back to where we were in 2018, 2019, all of a sudden, probably six, 7 months in, so a year from now, you would be having significantly lower cost. And so that's those two things right there. And I continue to work on the water issue, trying to see if there's any doggone way we can. It's a major project, but it's been studied 4 times by the federal government, and that's to move water from either the upper Midwest or from the Mississippi floodplain and bring it over our way. And right now, there's support now that's growing from the Texas delegation and from some other delegations as well. Major project. It doesn't bend the spending arc down, but it would allow us to actually, there's ways to recoup the cost of doing that and to do it in a responsible manner and an environmentally safe manner. But if we could get more water to this desert, which is already blooming like a rose, it would really bloom like a rose.
Andy, we have had a short period of time to cover a lot of various different questions. Is there anything that I may not have asked you or you feel is important for the voters to know?
Well, Terry, thanks for asking that question. I would just say there is so much going on right now, everything from the international scene to the domestic scene. We've just touched on a few issues that are really important to our district, but there are more and others. We didn't even get into infrastructure, which is really important for this area. But I'll just say I'd be honored to have Chandler Chamber's endorsement and your vote. And I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Great. Congressman Andy Biggs, running for re-election in Congressional District 5.